Depending on where you're listening to us in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jason Burns.
And I'm Danny Nucci, and this is the What About podcast. What about it?
Danucci, let me put you back.
Danucci. I like, very nice.
You're 16 years old.
Uh-huh.
You're in high school in Los Angeles, right? Who are you listening to on your boombox? Like, who were your bands and artists back then?
Well, interesting enough how Jenny mentioned Chrysalis Records. Back in the day when I was 16, I was listening to a lot of Chrysalis artists such as The Specials, The Selector. I was listening to a lot of Madness. I was listening to a lot of ska bands, and then the ska bands in LA, Fishbone. There was a band called The Untouchables. So I was like full on ska. I had my little Vespa and my black and white trench coat and my, yeah, man, I was like fully into ska. I was like nuts.
I don't think we've ever discussed this, Danny, which is crazy to me now, but I was big into the ska too. I had the checkered pants. I had the skunked hair like Ducky.
You did?
Oh yeah, I was big into it. But I was into to the New York ska, and actually Rhode Island had a huge ska scene with a band called the Agents and Racquetball.
Yeah. And what was there was what were they called? Oh God, I can't remember the name. Bim Scala Bim.
Bim Scala Bim is amazing. I actually booked a show. It was called Ska for Scar, which was Students Coalition Against Racism. And Bim Scala Bim, we had headlined that thing. It was awesome.
Wow. Well, it was great listening to this record and going through her song catalog. And
we should probably tell people it's not ska because we're ska heavy.
No, it's definitely not ska. Jenny Owen Youngs. I want to make sure I say that right because in my head it sounds different. I put the S in the wrong place. Who's a very talented songwriter and does a lot of things. As a mother, I think now is going out on the road. Yeah, it was such a great conversation. I love talking to her. I could have kept going. So without further ado,
let's do it.
Jenny Owen Youngs.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
Jenny Owen Youngs.
Why does she look way more professional than we do? It's like a whole studio. Like I'm obviously in my closet and she's got like a whole studio. I don't like it. I don't like it.
She's been doing podcasts for years.
I know she's a KG veteran here.
I could relocate to a closet if that would make everybody more comfortable.
I would feel more comfortable if that's okay. No, by all means. Welcome. Thanks for taking the time. I mean, I know I know you've been on the other end of the microphone, so it's you understand. But I'm very excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm interested in your schedule. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Jason. But I am interested in your schedule. We may have to get to that question. Go ahead, Jay.
There was an image of you on Instagram, and I'm in publishing. When I get a book, I love to hold it, the feeling of it, the smell of the pages.
Oh, yeah.
I saw you holding the picture of the vinyl for Avalanche, and I'm just curious, what is that feeling of sliding that out of the sleeve and getting to see it?
It is incredible. It's like, the culmination of, years of writing and honing and many hours spent in the studio making the recordings and then selecting the photographs and working on the liner notes and picking the color of the vinyl and, the sort of colorway of the label that goes on the record and all of that stuff just kind of like zhunked into one 12 by 12 flat little package. It's like all this time, effort, energy, blood, sweat, tears in like one little concise thing. And there's nothing. Do I stream music? Yeah, I listen to digital music all the time, but there's nothing like holding a record, especially a record that you made. You're like, yes. I did this.
And also just in terms of records, I mean, that's, I have an 18-year-old daughter, and so she has a record player, and she collects records, and she actually listens to the entire album.
Yes.
Which I don't remember, other than your record, I don't remember the last time I listened to an entire album from top to bottom, where you're just like listening to the whole thing as a record. Did you ever think that when you started playing horn instruments that you would end up being holding a vinyl record of pop, quote unquote, folk, quote unquote, alternative music
That's
of your own?
that's a lot of unquotes.
Well, because I can't listen. One of the things I hate doing is categorizing everybody. I realize that we have to do it for all the streaming platforms so that we can say this is what it is. But I couldn't categorize you. I mean, when I listen to you, I think of Dylan. I think of Sheryl Crow. Like there's so many different influences that I hear. It's a lot of it is so singable, which you wouldn't think, especially this record. The chorus is like wormed in my ear.
Yes.
So I wouldn't even, especially when somebody looks at your profile. Oh, this looks like a serious singer-songwriter. Jenny Owen Youngs, very serious singer-songwriter, very deep lyrics, which, by the way, true, but certainly not. You are not limited to that. And that was one of the most exciting things. I read a little bit that you started in like band. Is that right, in New Jersey? And then when did it turn into I'm writing on guitar, I'm writing on, or I'm starting to write songs? Yeah. Or did you write the first song on the tuba?
That would be amazing.
I wish I could write songs on the tuba. I started playing the flute in elementary school, and then I transitioned to the tuba because our band didn't have any tuba players, and I was trying to be a team player. But I had when I was like in 7th grade, my stepsister, who was older than me, was dating a guy who repaired guitars and built guitars. And I thought that was extremely cool. And I was like talking with him one day, and he was like, how's school? And I was like, blah, 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 flute and tuba. And he was like, how are you ever going to be in a rock band playing flute and tuba? And I, having never given any thought prior to this
I was going to say, had you given thought to being in a rock band? All of a sudden, he's like telling you what you're thinking. Listen, let me tell you something. I know you want to be in a rock band. This is not going to work for you.
Yeah. There's exactly one Jethro Tull. The world has room for one. And I was like, well, I'd never thought about this before, but I do love to sing, and I love writing poetry and whatnot, to whatever extent, you're writing poetry in 7th grade. You were expressing your thoughts in words already at this point? Yeah. I was doing that. I had spent some time in elementary school writing what I intended to be a fantasy novel. I was reading a lot of the sort of Forgotten Realms, Dungeons and Dragons adjacent novels, and I was like, what if I wrote this book about dragons? And I transitioned from that into poetry and my feelings. And when he had suggested, well, what about guitar? I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. That sounds like a really interesting next step. So he gave me some lessons. I learned some chords, and then I just started kind of playing with other kids in my high school in bands and stuff. So the tuba just went to the corner all sad, collecting dust, was all upset about what happened. The guitar got the tuba again. This always happens to the tubas. R.I.P. tuba, but honestly, the tuba deserved somebody who maybe was a little more agile and equipped to really shred on it than I. Everybody in your house must have been pretty psyched that the tuba took a backseat as well. Well, on the one hand, it's we got rid of the tuba, but now there's an amp, a guitar amp in the house. Yeah. And I think when you're learning any instrument, if your parents have a door they can close on you and walk far away, they are lucky. Unless you play the drums, there's no door. Yeah, there's no escape. You're leaving for a headlining tour in a few weeks, Jenny. I'm curious, how do you prepare for transitioning from home routine to road routine? Because, once you get comfortable, it's easy to get uncomfortable. Yeah, I find the hardest part of touring is starting or stopping, in either direction, getting over that hump from I'm at home and I'm in my routine to I'm on the road. Being uncomfortable on the road gets really easy once you have a minute, and then getting comfortable when you return to your own bed and your own refrigerator and all of that stuff. It's you'd think it would just be relaxing, but it is a little weird, getting your sort of non-sea legs. Yeah, because back. You sort of develop a gypsy mentality, right? You're used to waking up and just leaving and ending up in the next city. Yeah. Once you're instead of, I wake up at this time and I eat breakfast and then I go for a run or, do X, Y, and Z, whatever your normal things are, you're okay, I wake up very early and then I drive for a very long time and I drink very bad coffee. And then I try to eat something before I play a show. And then I go to bed too late and get up too early again. You get into that groove and it starts to feel very natural.
But that seems to be part of your, at least the most recent experience. I mean, just from what I've read, I'm thinking about you again because I'm fascinated by your schedule, and even the schedule that I'm totally fascinated by it because do something, girl, will you? I mean, Jesus, your schedule. I mean, it's unbelievable. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, by all means, get on the intraweb and look how many things this woman is doing. But you've gone through these periods where you were writing your own stuff, then you were making records, then you were on the road, then you stopped making records, then you were writing songs but not making records for a period of time. Then there was the pandemic, then you started writing with other people. So you've had these transitional periods that last for a decent amount of time. The one that I'm most interested in is at what point did you realize, and there's a B to that question. The first question, the A is, how did you end up writing songs with other people? And two, what was the thing that, the part about your songwriting that seemed most, people were most responsive to, that wanted to write with you? I hope that's clear.
So I had just put out my next most recent full-length album all the way back in 2012, and I had done like the big
Which one I want to know.
It's called An Unwavering Band of Light, and I had just done a big loop around the US in the van and like done the whole nine, put the record out, do the tour, do some press, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, I'm tired of being on the move all the time. There had been years where I was gone between like 6 and 9 months out of the year. And it was just like starting to really cumulatively wear on my soul. And I was like, I wonder what it would be like to not travel quite so much. And at the same time, I had started working with a manager who was encouraging me to explore the world of co-writing because he managed an artist who is very successful in that world. And he was like, I think that you could be really good at this. So I was like, well, it sounds like a way that maybe I could be creative and like participate
and not do this that I've been doing for 9 months,
or just like take a break from like from the grind, from this particular kind of grind, right? And diversify my creative portfolio or whatever. And I started taking trips to Los Angeles. I was living in Brooklyn still at the time. And I was going to LA so much that I was like, wait, now I'm still traveling so much. I'm just going to move to LA so I can just be there and do this like all the time and see what happens.
Okay, so you moved to Los Angeles, and you moved because the songwriting thing is going well, or because this has opened up and it seems to be something that is working at this point? Is that right?
Yeah, it's like...
Or did you just go like, one person wants to write with me in LA, I'm going a lot, I'm moving?
Well, I was working with a publisher when I first started making records, like putting records out back in like 2007, my first album came out. And at that time I was published by a company called Chrysalis. The guy who headed up Chrysalis for the time that I was there ended up leaving the company after it got bought by it got swallowed by a bigger fish.
Never heard this story before.
Right? It may sound familiar, but
never heard this story before.
Go on. He ended up founding a new publishing company, and I ended up signing with them for specifically this kind of pursuit. They were doing a lot. They were really focused on, right. They have plenty of artist clients, but also like they're very focused on writers.
So that's why Los Angeles and not Nashville?
That's why Los Angeles and not Nashville. And also just kind of like I think the genre stuff in LA at the time, at least, like that's like what I was on the hunt for. I did start doing trips to Nashville because I also like really enjoy sort of like modern like female outlaw style country music. Like I like songs where Miranda Lambert is going to shoot her abusive ex-boyfriend.
Sure, of course. Those are always good. Those are always popular. So when you, one of the first ones or any of them that you choose to talk about, what happens? So you show up, right? You're like, okay, we've put you together. Yeah. You're both very talented. Do you show up with pieces? Do you show up with lyrics? Do you show up with an idea that they want to do? Like any and all of it. I'm interested.
Sometimes you show up with like a list and you're like, I got this title, I got this concept, I got this dream I had, I got like all these things, they're kicking around. Does this resonate with anybody in the room? And sometimes everybody will have something like that, and you'll go through all the things until you like find something that everybody's like really amped on. Sometimes the most common way for writing sessions to start, in my experience, is everybody sitting around for about an hour, drinking some coffee and being like, so, if you're meeting for the first time, which is quite common, you're like, well, where are you from? And where'd you go to school? And who do we know in common? And what are your most recent emotional traumas that we can, really dig around in?
Which, by the way, up to that point, it was
Yeah,
cocktail
yeah.
party conversation.
Yeah.
How do you save the creative ego if you spill those ideas to the room and it's crickets and tumbleweeds? Like, how do you keep going?
Oh yeah. I think you have to cultivate an endurance for the crickets and tumbleweeds. It's like so much of getting sort of into the swing of co-writing sessions for me was really embracing sort of vulnerability on tap. You have to be willing and able to say the idea and have it just clank on the ground, because sometimes that's just the way it goes. And what's been really amazing to see over like years and years of doing this now is that so often, if you say something that like isn't the thing, like if you put forth an idea that isn't the thing, so often someone will spark on that in a totally different direction. They'll be like, not that, but what if this other thing that you just made me think of?
It's almost like a brainstorming session of, yeah.
Exactly. Like you're all pushing the boulder up the hill, and, sometimes somebody in the room is on a roll and you just got to get out of the way. Sometimes you're on a roll and you have to like chase that and like not let up. It's just all very sort of like, there's just like a lot of like give and take, and sort of like you have to be very like present, I think.
Do you ever wish there was another you could do it with?
Oh my God.
Rather than writing by yourself. How great would that be, right?
Oh,
How about another you with the same sensibilities but you could basically be very
there it
direct
is.
with yourself. You go, no.
That's the emergency broadcast. Yeah, I just heard it.
Yeah.
Emergency broadcast.
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, right on time.
But with that, Danny, sometimes, as we all know, I think especially creative people, we are our own worst critics. So that might even be a harder co-writing session to bounce ideas off yourself.
Well, I can't imagine Jenny would say to Jenny, "You suck. We're not doing that." No, come on.
You don't know what's going on in here.
No, because then the other Jenny would go, "Okay, just easy.
That's true.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Pump the brakes." Because obviously there's so many parts of you that get things done, and I feel like that person would come to the surface and go, "All right, let's stop. Let's get this done."
Yeah.
When you're writing your own songs, you can give it a little time to breathe. When you're writing with someone else, it's so result oriented. There's a clock. There's sometimes people are paying for this while it's happening. Can you tell me about the differences for you?
Well, it's when I'm writing for myself, even if I'm writing in a group, like with other people for my project, I always have that sort of like safety net of I can drag this back to my cave later and fine tune it. Like if we can make progress in like all these areas, I know that I can just sort of like put it under my tongue and let it dissolve and then figure everything out later. Like if there's something that's not quite gelling or whatever. But there is like a real sort of immediacy to session writing, like with somebody for a speculative thing, for a film and television pitch, or, with an artist maybe that you're meeting for the first time, you really want them to end the day being like, oh, I'm glad I did that and I'd like to do it again, that kind of thing. And also like, well, it's like, this kind of works both ways. I like it kind of like hits both sides of what we're talking about. Like at this point I've written, hundreds of songs that will just live on a hard drive forever. And then some of them come out. But like there is definitely a hard drive graveyard that you have to like accept and make peace with. And in some ways that's like liberating, because you're like, okay, if this day doesn't go incredibly well, they can't all be smash-olas.
But here's the cool thing about that hard drive graveyard, Jenny, is that at some point your children in the future are going to find that, and that is going to mean so much to them in ways that the public may never appreciate.
Oh.
Or better yet, when you decided, because I was reading an article on you as I do for these things, when you decided, you know what, I'm making a record. I'm not making an EP. I'm not making a series of songs. I'm going to make an entire friggin' record, which sounded like a very definitive idea that you had.
For sure.
Did you go to the hard drive graveyard for any of those songs to bring out to see if they were going to come from this, or did you have an idea of which songs they were? Because from what I read, you had many, you had a couple of 3 albums.
Yeah. I had about 30 songs, and probably like 20 of them were songs that I had deliberately written, with myself in mind. Like I had selectively chosen a collaborator or had been holding on to a song I had written by myself, knowing that it would like end up on a record, ideally, or in my dreams, at some point. But then there were like probably 10 that I kind of like pulled out of writing sessions where at the time I didn't know what the song was going to be for. None of those like hard drive graveyard songs made it onto the record, but they are kind of like still in the pool of songs that I'm like, oh, I want to like find a way.
Did you bring some of those to your producer, Josh Kaufman? Did you guys go through them when you sat down to make this record? Did you do a little show and tell? Because you hadn't known him before, right? I mean, basically it's what it is, right? You're going, okay, here, what are your thoughts? Did you know him before, or were you paired together like you had been done with other writing partners?
I had been directed to him. I was talking with my manager when it was time to sort of like start figuring out how we were going to do this, and he was like, what about this person, what about this person? And then he was like, there's this guy Josh Kaufman, I think you should listen to some records that he's produced. And I listened to the first Bonnie Light Horseman album.
Such a great album.
Oh my god, man. It just sounds so amazing. It just sounds so good. And I was like, well, this guy clearly knows what he's doing, and it feels like very much in the realm of like where I want to be sonically. So I'd love to talk with him. So we hopped on Zoom to meet for the first time, and
as people do nowadays.
And we just got to know each other a little bit, and I got a wonderful vibe from him and was like, well, hell, let's do it.
What about autobiographical songwriting? I have some favorites on this record. Believe it or not, and usually this is not the case, the title track I'm crazy about.
Yes.
And I'm crazy about it. And then one of the lyrics, I think it's the third track, I'd have to look at it. But one of my favorite lyrics is one of your most complex lyrics. I'm not going to say goodbye to you because I don't know how. I'll never say goodbye to you because I don't know how. I got to tell you, I'm listening to that song, and I'm a old man, and I'm driving listening to this song, and I'm just like, oh, mama, like it just
relatable. It's beautiful because it's one of those things.
Well, it's and one of the beauties of being an artist like yourself, you don't know which thing is going to strike. Is it the way you sang it? Is it the melody? Was it the instrumentation? Was it the lyrical content? Or my favorite, was it where I was when I heard it? It struck me, which is the part that you can never account for as an artist.
Yeah, that's like where the sort of like magical alchemy kind of like takes over. Is like you can do whatever you do to make a song, to make a recording of that song, whatever, but like the one thing you have absolutely no control over is the listener's experience. And there's like that environmental, there's their personal experience and personal history, like all of those things,
headspace where they are in that moment of their life.
Yeah.
Now having just come from being a co-writer with many people and deciding to make this record, I guess my question is, did you worry about putting too much of yourself here? Because I mean, there's obviously a lot of you, and I understand that certain things can be. I'm not going to tell you where you come from, where you have, but I know that sometimes things can be composites of different things that help get the idea out.
Yeah.
But as you were writing, did you notice, I'm touching some things that here we go.
Yeah. There are definitely some raw exposed nerves here and there. But I think that I spent a lot of time when I was making my earlier records trying to simultaneously express vulnerability but also protect myself. And I think that I have a lot less concern about protecting myself now. As I get older, with every year that passes, I'm like,
pain will do that to you.
Yeah.
But Jenny, and I know this is going to be kind of new to the process with this particular album, but part of that must also be thinking about how you have to carry those emotions with you in these songs moving forward, because now you're going out on the road and you're going to have to play them and revisit a lot of those emotional places where you were.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot in getting ready for these shows. And I think that like
Wait, have you played these out yet?
Just there are a few songs on the record that have been kicking around for a while, and I've played them like now and again over the years. But I just played the bulk of the record for the first time a couple weeks ago down in Nashville for Americana Fest. And
how was that? I want to know about that. I want to know what you come on. You come off stage and you're just like, I've just been through the ringer. Come on. What was it like?
I think it's good. I think the thing that I am figuring out about myself is that I feel very comfortable with vulnerable, sad, raw nerve music. Like it just feels kind of like home. so where I would expect maybe myself to walk off stage and be like, I must go crawl into a hole and stay there alone for 1 week's time. I am instead just sort of like, well, I feel normal now. I now feel like my complete self now that
so
I have.
In a way,
purged.
It's cathartic.
Yeah. I think
it's just, and it's hard for me to even hear you, characterizing it because again, these songs are groovable. Some of them are very danceable. Like I said, the choruses stay in your ear. It's not like I don't feel like I'm listening to something, that I want to cry to. It's just this is actually a very really listenable record when you're driving. I mean, so it's interesting how yet it's very personal, but yet very listenable. And I mean, you just must love playing this with these songs with a band. I mean, it's got to be fun just hearing them come to life like that.
It was really rad. Yeah, I mean, I haven't that was the first time I'd played with a band. These songs.
Oh, really? That's fantastic.
Yeah, because in the studio it was like me and Josh. We did like all of the basic tracking, and then on the 5th day we had Matt Barrick from the Walkmen come in and play drums on everything that we had. And so it was very like, even though we were doing like the foundational tracks live together, it wasn't like a big band recording kind of thing. And so I got into Nashville like the afternoon before, like my show was the next day, and I like
hold on. Yeah. There's no rehearsal for these songs?
There's one rehearsal for these songs.
There's one how long was the set? I just want to make sure I just want to hear just what kind of a genius you are here. One rehearsal for how many songs?
Just a tight 45-minute set. So just a
tight 45.
One rehearsal of all the songs that you've never played with the band.
Yeah. But the thing is, I've got a couple friends in Nashville who I've known since college, who I've like toured with a bunch. I've played with a bunch. They're incredible. They're the kind of people who have the skill set where they spent years and years learning other people, like a whole set of somebody else's music, and then doing it again the next night, and then doing it again the next night. So like I got with them, I rounded them up, and then they pulled in a guitarist and a drummer, and we all got together and rehearsed for a couple hours, and they're such pros.
I'm picturing a scene in like a caper movie where you have to call all the best thieves, to rob Las Vegas.
Exactly. It's Nashville's 11. Nashville is a great place to go if you need like unbelievable players to like learn your whole set and be able to play it, after one rehearsal for sure. I mean, just amazing players, and it was so rad. It was so fun and awesome to play these songs with them, with a band, with a full band, with that full band of like awesome players who were delightful to spend time with as well, and for a really nice crowd at the City Winery down in Nashville. It was just nice. Such a hoot.
So do you think the spending the last couple of years co-writing and going into a room and sharing these raw moments of your own life allowed you to be more comfortable to be raw in your own solo music?
I think that definitely has been helpful, just cultivating that sort of like headspace of vulnerability with like somebody you just met, like that kind of thing. That definitely feeds into it. And then I think just sort of like life continuing on, and like sort of like as you go, right? Like
keeps coming, don't it?
It keeps coming. It doesn't stop coming.
Yeah, keeps coming.
But it also sort of like, at least for me, I think what I'm aiming for is that like as I go and existing becomes heavier, like learning to let go of things that like don't really matter, which maybe previously I had been gripping very tightly, letting those
Sure, like
things
what
go.
other people think.
Yeah, exactly. If you can let go of that even a little bit.
Which is so hard in the social media age though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, but if you can diminish it, you know, like if you start at a 10 caring what other people think and having it an emotional effect of you, and you can get it down to a 5, now you can actually function.
Yeah. If you can sand it down, you've just made yourself like twice as aerodynamic, you know. Just
I love that.
I love it. It's a great
Fly.
image. That's a great image.
But I also try to flip it on its head. You think about it this way, Jenny, which is, you might look at social media and say, oh, this artist is doing that, this artist is doing that. But I guarantee you every single artist that you're pointing to is looking at your social media and go, oh, Jenny's doing this, Jenny's doing that.
Dude, I've never met a musician, no matter what level of success, like from your just getting started to your like legit pop
Your
star,
legends,
like
yeah.
just everywhere. Everyone is, at least part of their brain and heart is looking up to be like, well, how do I get up one more rung?
so
and it's sort of
true.
like, no matter where you are, everything is just relative. Like the carrot is always right in front, you know?
Or even just, just being a creative, they're like, okay, that's cool. That was great. Yeah, what's next?
And
like, okay, that's wonderful. I love it. I mean, you're getting to take a break. I mean, I wouldn't call about to set out on a tour a break of any kind, but you are taking a break from songwriting. I mean, is it nice to not have that pressure or that feeling like you should be doing more writing?
It is nice to take a break, because I think that like something that like after I had been living in LA for like a few years and I'd been doing, 4 or 5 sessions a week, I was like, it feels like I have less to write about. And I think that might be because I'm always in a writing session, and I'm having less experiences or whatever. So like, I think it's always good if you can to like rotate your creative crops, right? Like take a little bit of time away from writing so that when you come back to it, you get all fired up again, because you've been using other parts of your brain to do other creative things.
Sure, and going completely differently from what you're doing, like your Buffy the Vampire podcast.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
you can't get further away from, emotional autobiographical songwriting. We actually have a question about that, if I may.
Oh, yeah.
There's an audience question. We do an audience question. So this one's from Robin B.
Okay.
And Robin B says, you have run the Buffering the Vampire Slayer podcast since 2016. Mm-hmm. I am a huge, capitalized, Buffy fan.
Nice.
I'm curious what your favorite episode is, and she's like me, double questions, what you think the most influential episode was in terms of how it helped change television.
Oh, okay. Yes, I know the answers to both of these questions. I think that it's really hard to pick a favorite episode that isn't the body. And gentlemen, forgive me for spoiling Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
You're not spoiling anything here. I've seen them all.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So I think that the body is, although it is it's the complete opposite of like sort of like a quintessential Buffy episode, but I think it is so incredibly well executed and so devastating that it's like really hard.
Her mother passing?
This is the episode where she discovers her dead mother.
This I still have heavy emotional, not nightmares, but just like dreams about this episode because it impacted me so much.
It's so intense, and it's so unlike any other portrayal of loss and grief and mourning than I've ever seen. And there are so many moments.
A quick rundown of what this episode was?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the episode where Buffy comes home and discovers her mother, who had recently had, I think, brain surgery, but was like feeling better and had just gone on a date with a nice guy and whatever. She comes home and finds her mother on the couch, unmoving, unblinking. She is already gone. And there are just these like unbelievable shots that like put you inside of the mind of a young woman who is reckoning with the loss of her mother. And like, it's just unbelievable the way that like the EMTs are addressing her, and the framing is sort of like the EMT's mouth down to like his clipboard, and like he's like kind of out of focus as she's sort of like listening and then unable to listen, and like she's the first, I think, something like 15 or 20 minutes of the episode is just one long shot of Sarah Michelle Gellar making kind of a circle around her house, throwing up on the carpet, and then like laying a paper towel down on it. And you see like the liquid absorb into the paper towel. She goes to the door and looks out, and you only see her face, and there are children playing that you could hear in the distance, and wind chimes, and you're like, everything is going on outside.
Life continues,
as though,
but not,
yeah.
And there's this sense of that she can, as this powerful character, can save everybody, but she couldn't save her mother.
Yeah. She's powerless against the mundane. She's powerless against, you know, the ultimate enemy of life, which is death. Okay. Thank you for indulging me.
No, that was amazing. I listened to a visual representation of the disorientation of seeing somebody that you love no longer being on. I mean, again, never seen it. That's what I got from what you guys were saying.
And I don't know about you, Jenny. I saw it when it was probably like 18, 19. So I was just coming into adulthood and seeing my parents as older people at that point. So you start to think of that yourself. Like this could happen to me coming home one day.
Absolutely. It's a real killer of an episode. And then I think arguably the episode that has had the greatest impact on sort of changing the landscape of television would be the season 6 episode Once More with Feeling, which is the musical episode. And now you know that you can't actually make a show without having a musical episode.
Not if you're past season 4 or 5. You have to. It's a prerequisite.
Yeah. But at the time, it was like pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
Like there were not a lot of shows doing this, and they, you know, a lot of shows now, like Riverdale, every season does like a jukebox musical where they're using songs from, you know, an existing musical or whatever. But for Buffy, they wrote from the ground up. Like they wrote a full episode's worth of songs.
But it was also very it fit with the world because they were cursed, right? So they had to sing. It was part of the storyline. It wasn't just something force fed to the viewers.
Yeah. And what was like so great about the sort of like tool of the musical episode, it had such a great purpose, which was that all of these characters had to find a way, like the story needed for these characters to reveal things to each other that they would never say in just sort of like like regular conversation, whether it would be like to prevent like from hurting somebody or to protect their own pride or whatever. But they're all cursed with this musical kind of bug, so they're just like though they're trying so hard not to, they're spilling all of their secrets to each other, and it like really launches the season forward, you know, towards everything that's going to come in the following episodes.
Well, if we ever have Sarah Michelle Gellar on, Danny, we know who we have to call to help us with the episode.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I can help.
You know, if she's not on the road, she can go right into her podcast studio and join us.
Yes.
Woohoo! By the way, it was great when you guys were talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I'm glad that you said, for those of you who don't know, because literally my face glazed over. Did you see my face? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, and yet, thank God that she had described it with such passion and specificity that I got a really clear visual, and it was compelling to listen to. Thank goodness. Otherwise, my brain would have melted.
You're such a film fan, Danny, that I think if you went back and watched that episode, it's so cinematic and it's so emotionally charged. I think it's one of those things that has stuck with me for 20 some odd years. And not just as like a fan of the show, but just like it's so raw and intense because everybody has this sort of death looming hanging over us. And it's something to watch.
But do you think that part of it is it's so unexpected for a show with that normally does not have that sort of tone?
I think that was part of it, but it's also that show did such a good job with tone that it never strayed too far from grounding itself in reality. And what was nice about it is that you'd get the crazy over the top, science fiction stuff, and then they'd punch you right in the gut and remind you that Buffy is human.
Well, I mean, this is a promotion for go back and watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, now we have to get Sarah Michelle Gellar on.
By the way, that's the thing. We've got to get Sarah Michelle Gellar on. Don't you know Sarah Michelle? You must know Sarah Michelle Gellar, don't you?
I don't.
Yeah, me neither. But I do know Nikki Brendan, who was on the show.
Yes.
Maybe I'll call him and ask if he knows Sarah Michelle Gellar. I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that. By the way, not gonna do that. Anyway, this was terrific. You know me, I love talking about music, so I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next one. Until then, thanks for listening.
Music by Denny Nucci. Produced and edited by the same two people you heard hosting this show because they have no friends.